Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Mushroom Wonderland, where me and my dog Gunner head out into the forest to discover what kind of wild mushrooms are growing out here. Right now it is late spring, early summer. It's beautiful, and it's been moist here in western Washington, so there's a lot of mushrooms growing trailside. And on this channel, I hope to describe whether they're edible, poisonous, hallucinogenic, medicinal, or have other uses. Fungi are mysterious, and they're awesome that way. There's so many uses, and they're just magical because they just pop up wherever they want, and they disappear, and they come and go, and they're just so beautiful and fun to study. So that's what I do here on this channel, Mushroom Wonderland. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're not already, and let's head into the forest to discover what kind of mushrooms are growing wild out here in early summer of 2024.
Welcome to Mushroom Wonderland.
So this is an interesting mushroom here. It's pretty dark colored, and it would be easy to miss or mistake it for a rock. But when you pick it, there's some surprising features under here if you're not really familiar with mushroom morphology. But this has a sponge surface underneath, so rather than gills, it's going to have a sponge, and it really just feels like a sponge. There's a lot of mushrooms that have this sponge, and they're kind of generically lumped into a group called boletes. So this is technically a bolete that is growing in the springtime, and if you notice, it's got this maroon colored stipe, which is kind of like rhubarb or something like that, and it even has this strange like fibrous texture to it, and it's very lumpy on the cap and dark colored. And so this one, kind of a mouthful of a name, this one Xerocomelus atropurpureus, or the deep purple bolete. But it's also could be a mouthful if you wanted to cook these up and eat them, because they're totally edible. Sometimes you'll find a nice grouping of them, and I've had them when they were young and really stout and fresh. This one's kind of old. That sponge surface is kind of mushy, and there's some bugs in there. So, but you could definitely still eat this. Some people like to powder them, and it's a beautiful mushroom. And I don't know, they can have a tendency to get a little bit slimy when you cook them. So if you put them into gravy or a soup, a really good way to use these spring boletes. So the Xerocomelus atropurpureus, or the deep purple bolete, growing in the spring, a decent edible. And if you found enough of these, you know, take them home and slice them up and put them in your gravy with your dinner. Really delicious edible. Right here we got some beautiful spring bolete type mushrooms. There's another one right there. It's got this pinkish color and this kind of like cracked looking cap. You see that texture on there? There's a younger one here. And these guys, I'm gonna leave this bigger one, but I'm gonna pull this one up so we can look underneath at the sponge surface. This one, Xerocomelus diffractus, an edible spring mushroom. And so you see it has a sponge underneath that's kind of yellowish. These ones are getting old. Been chewed on by a bug a little bit, but it's a sponge instead of gills, and these are edible. You could cook that up. It could make a nice little meal if you wanted to try them out. These are totally edible, but you see that pinkish color there? Look at that. Weird. So that's where a bug was eating on it, or maybe a slug was having some dinner. And cool mushrooms here in the springtime. Oh wow, look at all these. Beautiful Culta Penus, or Culta Penus. This one, these polypores that are thin, and they just grow out of the ground like this, mycorrhizal. So growing with the trees around here, making spores for a long time. Really, really tough mushrooms. No good for humans. We don't eat them. They call them tiger's eye in Europe. Here, I think we call it, you know, the accepted American common name is the fairy stool or something like that. So really cool. Nice little fruiting of these Culta Penus, meaning perennial. They come back every year, but sometimes bigger fruitings than others. It's a good spring for them. And yeah, they'll just be sitting here dumping spores for, you know, a month or two. Well into summer, they'll dry up and just be crispy here on the side of the trail, provided people don't pick them all, which it's okay to pick one or two, but a nice flush like this, I know what they are. I don't need to flip it over. So I'm gonna leave these here. Just a beautiful trail side attraction, you know, get people's curiosity going about the fungal world. Wow, as I look right in here, I see some beautiful conch fungi growing on a tree here. It appears to be sweating. And the sweat is actually called guttation. It's just water that's being pushed out of the fruiting body. But these are brown rot decayers. They're eating these logs. These are known as Fomitopsis mountziae, our western red-belted conch, a beautiful mushroom. These ones are young and fresh, and they can grow for years. I would say that this fruiting body is a bit older, and then these younger ones have kind of just fruited more recently. They're doing their job great. They're taking on a lot of water. It's been raining, and so they're gutating like that, and it can look really magical sometimes. These are a great fungi for ecology. They are a saprotroph that eats the decaying wood. It turns it into these cubical stacks. It just eats all the cellulose out of here. So doing a great job in the forest. Not really of any use to humans. Maybe the most common fungi you'll see in the forest of the Pacific Northwest, or really anywhere for that matter. They just are growing on conifer wood everywhere. But a beautiful addition to the forest, a really tough one, hard to get off of the log. Just leave these behind. You know, some artists will paint on really big ones, but I don't have any use for them, so just gonna admire them from afar and leave them here to do their job. In spring, we have a certain set of mushrooms that come up when the cold ground gets warmer and wet. You know, fungi really like it around the 50-degree mark soil to start really growing. A lot of spring mushrooms need that warmth before they're gonna come out of like dormancy or just their mycelial state to start producing fruiting bodies. And then as it gets hot and dry in the middle of summer, we're gonna see less and less mushrooms. There are definitely some edible forageables out here. The oyster mushroom is a great spring mushroom, so I'm gonna head into this certain patch of woods in hopes of finding a flush of oyster mushrooms. We can have a look at those and see what else we see growing down here deeper into the forest off the beaten path. Because you have to kind of get out there to find mushrooms in the spring. In the fall, these very trails, I'm like kicking over mushrooms because it has something to do with these trees going into dormancy or gathering energy for winter time. And I think the fungi take advantage of that, and that's when you see a lot of the ectomycorrhizal fungi, the fungi that associates with trees. It often flushes in the fall right before these trees are about to go into winter. So there's some sort of a relationship there. Not exactly sure what it is, but just giving you a heads up. There's a lot of mushrooms out here, but there's gonna be a lot more in the autumn, come late September and into October. Tons of mushrooms. We're still finding them out here, so let's keep walking in the woods and seeing what kind of mushrooms are growing out here. So, wow, I just spotted this log. Like, that was not planned, talking about coming to find oyster mushrooms, but look at this. A big red alder, I could tell because it's just so straight and long, has fallen here in the forest, and it's got this flush of mushrooms growing on it. And these are commonly called your oyster mushrooms. So these ones have been here for a while. They are getting kind of dried out. Let me pick one. You can see, oh yeah, they're just writhing with bugs and stuff. But they have gills underneath, and the gills run all the way down to the base. When they start to get kind of rotten, you know, you can get food poisoning from eating rotten food. So resist eating rotten mushrooms, but Pleurotus pulmonarius is kind of generically what we're calling this, although that was described from elsewhere. These ones sequence out to a different unique species, but you know, some pretty big ones, but it looks like we're just a little bit late to the game for this particular flush. And so this tree had a beautiful flush. Nobody came and harvested it, but you could even take these and grow them on sawdust pellets, you know, like Traeger grill pellets or whatever, at home, or just wood chips. So oyster mushroom, really easy to ID, decent edible. And I see something interesting right here on the end of this log. We have oyster mushrooms, but we also have what are known as turkey tails. You can see why. Looks like a cartoonish turkey tail that a kid might draw around Thanksgiving time. And these are known as Trametes versicolor. So they're gonna have these white pores underneath, you see, little tiny holes where their spores fall out of. And that is the main indicator of Trametes versicolor. That, in conjunction with these concentric color rings, usually browns and oranges, reds, even grays, blues, and sometimes blacks. But these are a pretty typical color pattern for Trametes versicolor here. And they're very variable, and that's why they get the name versicolor, so many different colors. But they're very woody. You can't eat them, but you can take them home and make a tea out of them. People make tinctures and all kinds of different products out of turkey tail. Some people even will like smash these into a pulp and make paper out of them. So you can make paper out of turkey tails. They are the most highly studied mushroom in the world for medicinal properties, for cancer fighting benefits. If you ever heard Paul Stamets talk about his mother's fight with cancer, and she used this turkey tail in conjunction with other cancer therapies, and the cancer all but went away. So beautiful little mushroom. These ones are a little dry, but that's fine. They'd be great to forage and put into a tea. Add a little bit of local honey. I like to put a little lemon zest in the tea, and have yourself some nice nature tea, and you'll feel better after you do this for a little while. It's immunoregulating and boosting. It's an antioxidant, and it's just all around great medicinal mushroom. So it's turkey tail or Trametes versicolor. If you see these, go ahead and gather them. You could just dry them and process them later. I have another video where I make instant tea bags out of them. So yeah, they're pretty common too. So, you know, if you just find a couple like that and leave them behind, that's fine, because you'll find more if you're in the woods for very long at all. Right here's a neat mushroom. This one's looking kind of old and ancient, but it's very magical looking here in the forest. This one, Ganoderma applanatum, or the artist conch, and it gets this white pore surface underneath that you can scratch and it bruises, and artists do beautiful work on these. Even my daughter has done an awesome artwork on one of them that's still on my shelf today. These grow all across the country. Yeah, doing its job. See that? Just broke down. This wood is probably all disintegrating because of this fungus, and this is just the fruiting body. So this has been around for quite a while. They can grow for years, and this one has no doubt let off a lot of spores, eaten a lot of wood, and it's moved on to a different log where a fresher specimen might be fruiting. I'm going to leave that one here, but kind of a beautiful addition to the forest. You know, it's tough on a single walk in the forest to get a comprehensive look at what fungi is growing out here. So I've came across some other mushrooms in the past week that I have videoed. So I'm going to show those clips right now. We're going to jump all over the place to see some different mushrooms growing in different habitats, and we'll come back here to the forest. Let's check those out. All right, here's a bit of an urban setting, and look at these mushrooms popping up all right here. Very kind of brownish gold cap when I flip it over. Ew. Slug trails and stuff, but they have these chocolatey brown gills related to your grocery store button mushroom. This is a common kind of spring, early summer mushroom, the Agaricus augustus, or the prince. These are not the most beautiful specimens, but you can often find these in urban settings right here in the city, growing in beauty bark. You can see there's more kind of coming up here. Sometimes you'll see a big shrump, and there'll be a large one coming up. Very hardy mushrooms, very thick, and delicious. These are a good edible mushroom. They smell like almond, almond extract, and really good edible. But right here growing along this path, as you can see, Gunner passed by. He didn't pee on these, but there's a good chance other dogs have peed on these, so I'm gonna make sure to wash my hands and not eat these ones. Be aware of that when you're in the city. And another thing I noticed is these potato bugs. They love to get in there. We call them potato bugs or roly-polies. What do you call them where you're from? Anyways, for some reason, even young, large buttons. If you look on the cover of David Aurora's famous mushroom Bible, Mushrooms Demystified, on the cover is this mushroom, the prince. And sometimes the buttons are big and fat, but sometimes I'll cut them open. They'll be totally unopened, but still somehow there's roly-polies or potato bugs inside of them. So a nice little fruiting of them. It's a little bit dry. Had it been raining more, I think a couple of large fruiting bodies would have came up, but instead there's 5 or 6 smaller, more dried out ones. These ones are way past their prime. And then we come across one other urban kind of mushroom. These ones, the fairy ring mushroom, these ones aren't really growing in too much of a fairy ring, but this one, Marasmius oreades. So in France, they really like to eat these. They have kind of an umbonate cap, irregular margin, these whitish to kind of fleshy colored gill color. And growing in lawns, you can see they got this little umbo. See that little bump in the middle? That's called an umbo. And they'll often grow in clusters and clumps. And a big fairy ring. Again, beware, dogs pee on these areas, so you might not want to eat these. Although these are also a good edible, a forageable mushroom here in the spring. And these are some nice specimens. These younger ones. I've seen them dried. In Europe, they sell them dried. They're really quite a delicacy in France. Tough little mushrooms. Tough mushrooms. The stems might even be too woody, but you can go to big soccer fields and stuff, baseball fields, and these will be everywhere. Huge rings of them. Really cool. Right down here on the side of this trail where this tree fell down, I see some smushed mushrooms. Look at that, these whitish colored mushrooms with dark gills. These ones, known as Candoleomyces candolianus. So a saprobic mushroom that has dark spores, so it might look like a psilocybin mushroom, hallucinogenic mushroom or whatever, but Candoleomyces, inedible. Not really much in the literature about people wanting to eat these. But if you look at the edge of the cap, it has these little appendages hanging off of it. They call that a appendiculate margin. And they're always this kind of just mauve tan color, lighter colored caps, and they're very hygrophilous. They dry out when it's dry out, and they have these dark purple brown spores. So Candoleomyces in the Satharalaceae, inedible, but growing this time of year. So if you see those with the dark spore print, good chance that it's a Candoleomyces. These little guys got clobbered by the falling branches. So anyways, let's keep going into the woods. What'd you see, buddy? What'd you see? What's that? Let's pick it and have a look. Whoa, look at that. Phylloporus, a gilled bolete. This one, very bright yellow gills. There's quite a few gilled boletes, which is kind of weird, But this one, inedible. They only usually grow singularly, usually at the end of winter. Here we are going into summer, and it's growing. So yeah, it's a spring mushroom. Phylloporus, there's a couple of species, but this one's pretty common in the Pacific Northwest. And yeah, gilled boletes like Omphidius and these, and there's a few others that I can't come up with right off the top of my head, but kind of this grayish brown with black spots. Not really a very attractive looking mushroom. And so we're going to leave that there, but kind of cool. Phyloporous species. This is also the time of year in these conifer forests that we find monotropic plants. So that's plants that don't need chlorophyll. Long ago, they ditched their ability to photosynthesize. They typically live in these dark forest settings where not typically a lot of sun comes in. So they were struggling for sunlight. So they decided they were going to attach to a fungi and then feed off of it like a parasite. So these are interesting plants and they're very beautiful. A lot of them are in the same genus as like blueberries and stuff, Vaccinium, but they could be growing trail side, like right here. We see some of them coming up, and we're going to take a look at all these different little monotropic plants that I see growing along here, because a lot of times people think, are those fungi? And no, they're not. They're actually plants, but they're parasitizing certain fungi. So finding these mushrooms, so finding these plants can sometimes lead you to good mushrooms in the autumn. But in the spring and early summer is when we're going to see these monotropes popping up. They're all over the place. Let's have a look at some of them. This is a very interesting plant that grows here in the Pacific Northwest. It's actually commonly called the gnome plant. This is a mycoheterotroph that is parasitizing a fungi underground. So I'm not exactly sure which fungi, but the gnome plant doesn't contain chlorophyll. So it's got this pinkish color, which is really kind of neat. Here's a whole nest of really young ones that are starting to pop through the moss. And they're not fungal, although you might think so if you just see these on the forest floor. Often associated with Russula, Suillus, maybe Matsutake, some Trichiloma. These plants actually grab onto the fungal structure underground, the mycelium, and they derive their nutrients from the symbiotic relationship between the fungi and these trees. Big Douglas fir tree here. So a nice grouping of these, like, you know, you might call it a nest of gnome plants. This is a monotypic genus, so it's only got one species in the genus. Pretty cool. This is another one of those mycoheterotrophs. This one called pine sap. Another mycoheterotroph, not using sunshine for its energy. It's just parasitizing fungi underground. It grows these really unique looking clusters of pinkish and yellowish flowers. So this one related in a way to the gnome plant and the ghost pipe because of its mycoheterotrophic nature, just leeching off of other organisms for its food. Has been working for a really, really long time for these. So really cool one, pine sap. So those are super cool. It's just crazy how nature has found ways to adapt and overcome, and all of these complex relationships. And I feel like we probably just barely know the half of it, if we've even scratched the surface at all. So monotropic plants, just another lifestyle of an organism here on Earth that is fascinating to me. And I love bringing this stuff to you guys here on Mushroom Wonderland. I'm going to be teaching some introductory mycological courses at Olympic College in Bremerton. So if you're in the area, it's only like $79 a person. It's 3 Wednesday nights, the last 3 Wednesdays in July, and that's just for summer quarter. And if it goes well, we're going to do fall and just keep going and build a mycology course at Olympic College. So I'm really excited to be able to do this. I was referred through the Mycological Society. I am not an academic mycologist, so we're just going to stay really introductory, talking about what is fungi, the history of mycology, identifying wild mushrooms and how they grow, cultivation, and ethnomycology. So it should be really cool. Just go to Olympic College, just Google that, and continued education. So these are non-credit courses, but just for community involvement and people who have an interest in mushrooms. It's now available here in Kitsap County, taught by yours truly. I'm looking forward to it. So super stoked if you want to come on that journey with me, and we're going to learn a lot. I've been working so hard on this curriculum, so going to be super cool. So please do that. Let's keep going. Wow, we're just walking down the trail, came to this log. Look at this amazing fuzzy fungi with a bunch of metabolites coming out of it. This is like fungal urine kind of. Wow, it's very soft. And this stuff contains all kinds of unknown chemicals. I don't even know what this fungus is, but I just think it's cool. We call that guttation. So far more colorful than the Fomitopsis mountsiae back there. This fungi is excreting a lot of metabolites, and you can just see how this fungi is climbing on its substrate, growing on this moss. Really interesting. I'm not sure exactly what this is. I'll put it into iNaturalist and I'll plug a name in here if I find something out, but just thought that was really cool to see this gutating so much. It looks like it's really loving it out here, so cool. Red alder. Yeah, check this out on this little stick. Oh, we've got a nice little fruiting. Looks like 4 fruiting bodies here. So this little stick is infected with the fungus Pisces tubiformis. So there's kind of a funny little joke on one of the identification forums where one of the moderators and a really great amateur mycologist, Yimin Wang, is sequenced a whole bunch of these because they can look so different, but they all come back as Pisces tubiformis. So kind of a funny little deal. Whenever I find these, I think of that and those Facebook posts. But you know, there's 4 of them here. The Pisces badius seems to be more of a winter mushroom, and these ones you can find when the weather starts to warm up, hence why they're young and virile and fresh. You see that porous surface under there. These are just letting off a lot of spores. Beautiful little fruiting of them. I'm gonna leave them here in the woods. Wow, so right here we have a pretty interesting flush of little mushrooms. Well, these might not be interesting to everybody, but I think they're pretty interesting. These are a species of Conocybe, Conocybe fragilis, and it's actually a pretty rare mushroom that only fruits in a couple places in the country according to the website iNaturalist. And that's a website where you can take observations, photos of these mushrooms right here, put a geolocation and nice detailed photos, and then it can tell people online where these might grow. Here's some of the younger ones. They've got kind of this purplish reddish cap. Very beautiful, and when I pick one and look underneath, it's gonna have kind of orange gills, but these are gonna get darker with age, and eventually they'll drop a pretty dark orange spore print. We can see that leaf right there where the spores fell out of this one and landed on that leaf. So they're out here doing a good job. There's a pretty nice fruiting of these. And I know that these are Conocybe fragilis because I have sent in samples to be DNA sequenced and they came back as Conocybe fragilis. Although if that is the correct ITS barcode is still in question. Related to some deadly mushrooms, so not one that you want to eat, not known to be hallucinogenic. I just thought they were kind of neat. And they're growing really well here on the side of the trail. So these are saprotrophic, meaning they're just eating decaying matter growing here in the wood chips. And they really like this. You can see that kind of sweeping cap, the way that cap shape is. That's pretty indicative of Conocybe. And then they have these kind of swooping gills that get fat towards the bottom and then kind of fan out, sort of like an umbrella or something. So I like these mushrooms. I think they're pretty cool. If you see them, make sure that you upload them to iNaturalist so that we know where all they're growing. Yeah, we'll keep going. So if you hop over to mushroom-wonderland.com, got these cool new shirts. Wait, this is backwards, isn't it? Hold on. There you go. Got these cool new shirts. MW Mushroom Wonderland. Got some mushrooms growing in there. Kind of slick, kind of sleek. So represent, help support. Get yourself a t-shirt or a coffee mug or a hoodie over at mushroom-wonderland.com. You could go to Patreon and get a $5 membership, and you can follow on all of the other social media platforms. I'll put all of those links in the description. Again, thanks for joining this episode of Mushroom Wonderland. Watch out for the next one. Until the next time, much love.